Hi, I'm Matt Williams. Welcome to Glimpses. My guest today is a good friend and a very funny actor, author, and comedian. He is Tim the Toolman Taylor, Mike Baxter on Last Man Standing, the voice of Buzz Lightyear, and he is the real Santa Claus. Mr. Tim Allen, welcome to Glimpses.
Hey, Matt, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good right now.
June 13th. You just had a birthday.
Just had a birthday, and as I said, one of my friends, I was waiting for my legs to fall off. It was one of those. I remember every even number, 40, 50, 60s, 70s. It reminds you, as an old friend of mine, as I drove a group of. I have an IMSA license, so I can race cars. The home improvement days, and so I raced for these guys, and one guy who was in the used food business, and for a weekend I helped race cars for these guys, and I was so busy with this show, calling back to you guys and working on home improvement. I was busy all the time, and he goes, "Man, you got to slow down. How many summers do you think you have left?"
Yep.
And it stuck with me for so many years. Every time I go, God, it isn't 40, it isn't.
No, you just turned 70, but I want to ask you, how old do you feel inside?
I think it was Bob Hope said it on Johnny Carson. If you didn't know how old you are, how old would you be? And I think about 11 or 12. I go back to the day that my blessed blood father was killed in a car accident. And that's when I kind of became aware of myself and became aware of life, for good and for bad, trauma aside. I woke up about 11 years old, and that's about where I'm stuck.
Do you know what, Tim? That's interesting because through the years, and this is the truth, people have asked me, why is Tim Allen so funny? And I said, I think it's because he's got an impish 12-year-old boy living inside him.
Right.
And and who loves to tease and taunt. And I believe that's true.
And apparently wear a bathrobe around the set.
Oh, yeah, well.
Jesus.
You mentioned your dad. Let me ask you, do you think pain is prerequisite to comedy? Do you need pain in your life in order to be funny?
It's a good question. I sat with a bunch of comedians once. I believe we were in Cincinnati at the Comedy Condo doing a club. I don't even remember what the name of the club was. It wasn't a punchline. There was four of us there, and all of us, two guys were leaving, two guys were coming in for that week, and all of them had pain in their lives. And I sat there and I was going, I had other than the severe tragedy of losing your father, which you don't really, I think you get by. I don't know if you get over.
Right.
And my life was pretty damn good. And these other guys, the bees stung my mother to death, and it was just one thing after another. And I was going, I'd like to make something up, but no. I liked going to church when I was a kid. I liked being around I had a great neighborhood. There was a lot of support after my father passed, so we didn't process it, which is another whole question. I said, pain isn't that life? I mean, they slap you in the ass when you come out of your mom, and from then on, it's just managing some sort of discomfort, this place.
Right. But you, around 11, 12, after your father died, is that when you discovered you were funny? You could make people laugh?
Literally, I was a funny kid no matter what. That's what I was.
Always.
A smart ass. I was a smart ass kid all the way through. And my father was a funny guy. My grandfather was a funny guy. It kind of runs in the family. Literally, and I don't say this in any gloating sense, it's a gift from the Creator.
I believe that.
There's
I believe that
like
100%.
I love to laugh so much. I saw Richard Pryor in concert a long time ago, and I almost had a seizure. I was laughing so hard. I said, "What a gift to walk into a room and have somebody talking at a mic, no band, no backdrop, and you laugh for 40 minutes." And if I said I could do that, and very often on concerts, I get off the stage And I've done this with my same opening act, same producer for almost 30 years. And it's such a gift to give people. I don't say this, and I don't mean it. I'd almost do it for free at this point. I love the gift of giving those people. I always wonder what it's like when they're in the car on the way home. You know, either if they did like what I did, it's such a gift. In very horrible times in my life, there's been very few of those horrible times that I didn't find something funny about it.
And that gift of laughter, you know, some people say, oh, a show is only a sitcom. I go, wait, you have millions of people sitting in their homes laughing simultaneously across the country. There's got to be some kind of endorphins let loose, or some kind of good vibes let loose, because that comedy unites us. If we can laugh with someone, that bonds us with them, right?
I'm 100% with you. And I will give you guys great credit, because I was very new at home improvement, not new at comedy. The other side of comedy, especially on television, is you have to have it laid on top of drama. And I said, you brilliant guys wrote that story about, and there was enough drama so that there's a contrast between what is real television-wise and what is funny about that. I said, without the heart you put into that, I said, the three of you were geniuses at putting that show together.
Yeah, but it was all built around you. And pardon me, Gene Blythe, the casting director at Disney, went to the Montreal Comedy Festival. Is that right? And he found this young comedian, and he came back to Jeffrey Katzenberg and the Disney folks, and he said, I think this guy has something. And Disney signed a deal with you. And then they kind of shopped you around the lot. And Jeffrey kept calling me saying, I want you to meet this guy. And I kept saying, I don't want to work with another stand-up.
Hey,
and he said, no, I just want you to meet him. I just want you to meet him. And finally Jeffrey goes, Matt, I'm not asking you to marry this man. I just want you to have lunch with him. And at that lunch, God's truth, I sat down across from you. And within 2 minutes, it felt like a brother or something. We started exchanging stories about going to church and teasing our brothers and getting in fights, and both from the Midwest, and it was symbiotic in some ways.
Well, and that funny thing, Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg came to the Improv in Los Angeles, and the broad story is I was a road comedian, which translates into, on the road, you got to do between 20 minutes and 40 minutes, and in LA, they want you to show it all in 4 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes at the Improv or the Comedy Store or the Ice House. And I was not used to doing that. And somehow those two guys saw very little bit, and I don't work the Improv that much because I was on the road. And they brought me to the studio, and Jeffrey Katzenberg, speaking of marriage, he said, Disney would like to be in a marriage with you. And I said, well, show me the ring first. And the whole room just got real quiet. And they offered me, not knowing what road comics make pretty good money, at least I did at that time. And what they were offering me meant just a similar salary. And I said, and I don't really want to do Dead Poets Society, which he offered me, or Turner and Hooch. And at one point I said, so you're talking about a Tom Hanks or a Robin Williams doing their bits? And I said, just not that interested. And just quickly they said, I went back to Detroit, got back on the road, and Jeffrey couldn't, greatest guy in the world to me, he and his wife Marilyn, love that couple. And he said, Tim, I don't think you understood what I was saying. He called me in Michigan. He said, I don't think you understood. Disney wants to deal with you. I said, I understood, Jeff. I just don't think you understand the finances of it don't make any sense to me. And he went, well, what would you want to do to get on television? I said, I just want to do Carson is really what I want to do. And the only thing that interests me is if you bastardize this old house, the old Norm Abrams and, come on, help me.
Bob
Villa, I'm sorry. Bob Villa and
Villa.
Norm Abrams. I just switch it around where Norm is the champion, fixes everything, and Bob comes in and screws it up. And I want a neighbor like my neighbor in Michigan, who I never see. He's so far away because it's an acre lot. I still don't know what he looks like. And I wanted a neighbor that you never see, you just yell at. And instead of the sitcom 2 boys and a girl, I wanted 3 boys. And then he said, well, maybe I can get you to meet, he wanted to meet me to meet you so bad because of the record you'd had. But the funny thing was that he was so effusive about it. He was on the table once in the conference room doing a bit from Dead Poet Society, and I said, Jeff, you got to get off the table. He's doing Howard. I just didn't want to do a Robin. I didn't want to redo Robin Williams.
Well, I got to give you credit. I don't think most people know this. Before we started shooting Home Improvement in Detroit, you took acting lessons from a man named David Regal, who happened to be my wife's acting teacher, because she's from Detroit. And you studied with David before we ever shot the pilot. And you came in not as a stand-up, but also as a trained actor.
Yeah, it was Regal was being really honest with me, and I don't know if that came from you or Disney. He said, I'm crawling across the floor doing Roman lines. He said, please help me suffer. And he goes, no, I need to feel. And I go, this is just ridiculous. From a comedian's point of view, to stretch an emotion out. And David said, this is after weeks of this. And he said, and I took improv in college and did theater. I just wasn't that interested in, I kept going off in improv. I just would naturally do that. To be serious was odd. And then David said, I got to be honest with you, Tim. They really just want to know if you can memorize lines. That's what this is all about. They just want it really. And I go, that's it. He goes, I got to be honest. They just are terrified that you won't be able to read, do a dialogue. And this was after weeks of us. We became pretty close friends after that.
But I remember very specifically, he taught you one thing, and this is where you were brilliant. He taught you that inside you always have an inner monologue going, and occasionally you speak the lines, you speak the thought. And I often said the key to comedy, especially on TV, is to think funny, because the camera records your thoughts. And you always thought funny. You could get a laugh. And also, this is your testament to your skill as a stand-up comedian. We had 300 people in the audience. So there would be a laugh. And because of all your stand-up, you would start riding that wave. And you would do a look at Al, and then you would and build the laugh because you knew how to play the audience. So you were always walking this line between stand-up comedian, actor, and playing to that audience as well as to the camera. And that was genius. That was really, really something.
Well, thank you for that. And the real truth of that is that all I was learning from was, Earl Hindman and especially Pat Richardson, who I tell this story all the time. A couple times she was real emotional. And I told Pasquin, the director at the time, I said, we got to cut. What's the matter? She goes, I'm acting. And I go, oh. Because I learned early to listen to other actors and just respond. Don't keep, she would tell me, I can see your mouth doing my line. You're going, I was mouthing her line to know when to start. And pretty soon she said, and Earl said the same thing, just learn to listen to the other person. That's the first thing with acting. Comedy's not like that. Comedy, there is a rotation in your head. With acting, and it's been a gift and a curse. I'm like most other comedians. If I do a straight bit, I don't think I'm doing anything. I remember Marty Short was in a movie with me, and I go, Marty, you just got to answer the phone. You don't have to go, oh! He's constantly doing a bit. You just answer the phone, Marty. And he does. If comedians aren't doing anything funny, we don't feel like we're engaging at all.
I want to talk about the origin of More Power and the grunting and all that. If I remember the story correctly, you were at a conference, you were doing stand-up for a group of men, and you were tanking. It wasn't working. Can you tell that story? Because this truly, in the moment, you gave birth to something in the moment out of desperation. I want people to hear that story.
I was doing a Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company sales banquet in Akron, Ohio. And I had a set routine I did. God, it's a long story because it was just, I learned early, beginning, middle, and end. You do a beginning, just who you are, get to something, and then finish it. But these guys didn't care because it was like Scotch and sirloin night, and it was they're all at round tables, so literally half the room is back to you as they're eating. And all I hear was clinking of plates and salt shakers, as though you could hear that. And they're just grumbling. I'm dying, literally nothing. You could have had a mime up there or people's cleaning fish bowls. There was nothing going on. So I said, I'm done with this. So I just mimicked what I was hearing, because you hear men eating. There's all this grumbling. So I started going, hey, and literally some of the guys that were seated turned around. What is going to do? Huh? And they're looking back at me. And then I started going, And he goes, yeah. Then I hear guys go, that guy's pretty funny. Turned around, I got into the lawnmower bit, and every time, instead of putting a punctuation on it as a joke, I would grunt. And so be it. It literally was the guy that grunts. And it said,
and didn't you, if I remember correctly, didn't you ask the audience, how many of you have a drain in your garage?
Right.
And
Well, then I got real about what is passionate to me, and God, as it fold into today's world. I went to college, and I was always about women's lib classes, not because I'm politically correct, because I thought I would meet women in those classes. You meet women, but you meet a lot of women that like women in those classes, and that's fine with me also. And because of that, and because being raised by a strong mom and a lot of women in my life, I became very curious about if there was a thing called masculinism. And I became a masculinist comedian, not apologizing for behavior of men, but investigating what makes a man. And that's all I've really, still in my comedy, is I make jokes about what men do and don't do. But it's out of great respect. And these days, it's not politically correct to celebrate men, and boys don't know how to be men in my area. There's really a confusion, and that's where my whole act was. And it's surprising to me that we seem to have gone backwards. Where a guy like me, who I just adore my men friends. I
Right.
Probably not as much as my women friends, because I enjoy the sensibility of women. And I'm used to men. It's like I'm used to my garage, and I don't appreciate it. That said, my act became all about what men do best compared to how we view women. And
also, Tim, when you told us about your neighbor that all we ever saw was this, and we said, yes, that is a fun gimmick, but who is this guy? And then we read a number of books about masculinity, and one of the underlying premises was it takes a man to teach a boy how to be a man. So Earl Hindman became the ultimate mentor, teaching Tim how to be a man. And that never grew old.
No, and he was, God bless him, he was, every day we'd be back before the curtain call and the opening, and he'd remind me of the word grateful. And I've never forgotten that. I'm so grateful to be working. I'm so grateful to be, he'd say this, you just don't find opportunities like this where we all get along. Not only that, but we're the #1 TV show. And all of that didn't mean much to me as long as I didn't embarrass the rest of you. And I was learning from those guys all the time, but Earl was constantly telling me about the calmness of life. And of course, his life was anything but multicolored. He was a consummate mentor.
And a kind man.
Oh,
he was just a gentle man,
just
in the truest sense.
Grateful. His funniest line to me was his mother was so excited that he was on finally success. I mean, taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3, I believe, was where I first saw him, and he was very different in that movie if you haven't seen it.
Yeah.
And then now he's a huge star, and his mom goes, "Wouldn't you know it? My son is finally a huge star, and I only can see from the nose up." You can't even, no one even knew what he looked like, because I don't think we ever showed his full face, even if by mistake.
Never. Last week, I did a podcast with Mr. Richard Karn.
Yeah.
And we went through all that casting. And remember, he was originally named Glenn. Your idea was Glenn, and we had a
Right.
tall, skinny guy with a bald head, and we went through all of that. And then Richard, we kept telling him, "You're only going to do the pilot." You remember? And he says,
Yeah,
"I'm
yeah,
fine
yeah.
with that." We said, "You're only going to do the next episode." He goes, "I'm fine with that." And
Oh,
by the
really
third
good.
episode, you two had a chemistry that no one can write. You really cannot write that. You two just had a chemistry. Why do you think that clicked? Do you have any idea why you two just clicked?
Every gap in anything that disregards politeness, Richard has in spades. You know, so every time he was the type of person I would like to be because he's genuinely kind and listens to people. I'm not organically verbally kind. I think I'm a kind person, but I'm
Right.
kind of sharp-witted like that. And Richard, he would take that stuff and he doesn't laugh at or anything, and so it calmed me down. And then I learned to listen, and he's still like that. We still see a lot of each other. It's still the same dynamic. He's just a kind, thoughtful, really funny guy. That he goes. It's a lot of Tim's. Oh, Tim. That.
Do you know, I hadn't thought of it till just now, Tim. I realized he's kind of the goat to your racehorse. You know how with racehorses, because they're high strung and they love to run,
Right.
and you have to have a goat there. But also, people underestimate the second banana. And he brought up the dueling dowels the time you did that, and you started fencing with the dowels.
Right.
And you were trying desperately to get him to laugh, and he refused to laugh. But he said, "In my head, I was laughing so hard it hurt." And you kept doing your shtick, and he just kept that straight face, and it made it even funnier.
Yeah, I've learned how to break him up
Yeah.
because we've done gigs together since then, and I know how to get to him because I got to surprise him now. Because my genuine will stick, but if I go calm for a little bit and then throw it at him, I can break him up still.
That's funny. And also, I don't think people realize this. Your litmus test when you were rehearsing scenes and doing things on tool time was, could you get the cameramen to laugh?
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah.
If those guys, if you could get the cameramen to laugh, you knew you had something, you found something.
Yeah, I did that, and any of the people that are wandering around. I think the ones that Sean Shea was the one that I couldn't get. I
And
remember
she was the stage manager.
stage manager.
Yeah.
And I was hanging, and I would do any prop act because I didn't know that you could have a special effects guy come in. So a lot of times I hurt myself because you guys didn't want to pay for a stunt person.
And it was only a stand-up comedian, so
Yeah, right. It's just
easily replaced.
easily replaced. I remember I'm upside down in the rigging. I'd fallen off the roof somehow, so I'm hanging upside down in nylon straps that had forced its way around my testicles, and that word came out upside down. Sean came over to my upside down head, and you all were in the control room, and I said, I got to get down from here. And she's with the microphone. He's got to get down, he says. So they want you to finish the scene. I go, I've got to get down here. I said, my ball sack is wrapped around and it hurts. She goes, he says his ball sack is wrapped around the thing. And this went on, and I finally says, cut me the F down. My balls are caught in this stupid thing. And she goes, he's getting pretty angry now. He wants to come down because apparently his balls. I go, couldn't break this woman up. Nothing helped. And finally, you guys let me down.
Well, I think that was Carmen who was being mean to you. I wanted to cut you down. Let's talk about Scott Calvin, because you've got a new series on Disney Plus, and you're working with your daughter. What's that like?
Oh God, she's my older one was came in as a producer on a TV show we did with Richard on History Channel. And there's nothing quite like it. She goes by my grandma's name, last name of Fox. My grandma's name was Catherine Fox, so my daughter, her name is Catherine. She goes by Fox. And no one knew it was my daughter. And to hear people talking about her, going, have you talked to the producer? And I'm going, oh God, what'd she do? And they go, that is a very kind, extremely bright. And it's so weird to hear that and wonderful.
How wonderful.
In this case, I'm doing Disney. They want me to do a reboot of Santa Claus. I wasn't all that pleased with the way Santa Claus ended. The third of the series was the weakest, but the biggest deal. I mean, it had money and special effects, all that. And I wasn't sure I wanted to do it. And then it was slowly, they want to do, well, it's kind of a TV show, but it's not TV money, and it's not a movie money, it's streaming. It's a different deal. And I said, if you can get a story there. They finally did. It was a struggle to get going. And as we're reading, we had to do most of this on Zoom. And then I said,
because of COVID? Was that because of COVID?
We did just like we're doing now. We did a lot of the script revisions. I'm executive producer on it. And I said, listen, I don't want to say this out loud because it's not, I want to see your faces when I say that. I'd like to get my younger daughter as an elf in the background. So at one point she can just go, hi, Santa. So it'll be forever. She'll have been in a movie with me. And they go, oh. And I said, I'm not pushing this. It'd be kind of fun. They go, well, no, we fine. But if she says, hi, Santa, she has to get on tape and it has to be through SAG. And I went, shoot. All right. And they said, well, we're reading lines today with other actors. She can just be tucked in there. And we just have her down for SAG. And I'm looking at the script, says, this is for Santa's daughter. I don't even want, this is too I don't want to do this. It says, no. They really were looking at a more Zoptic look for Santa's daughter, a little bit larger person. And so she came in, and she was at part of the garage where my studio is at home. And she read that so well that even I went, and all the studio execs, everybody was going. I said, let's move on. That was good. And let's read her. I don't want to do this. She says, has she ever done this before? And I said, no, let's just move on. We got the girls that were from New York. We had all the Zooms up. Could she read again on Friday? I go, guys, I don't, Tim, this has nothing to do with you. And so she read on Friday again without me. And then I looked at him, again, all these boxes are going, guys. Then she read with the New York actors, and the joke was so subtle. My kid got it. She just hit the joke. She used to read Last Man Standing scripts with me, and our joke was, I said, you're not getting the bit. It's not landing. I was doing real rude to her. Uh-huh. And she got it, and then called me I was on a gig in Florida, and they called and says, Tim, they really want her to read with you, read with me. And obviously there's connection between her father and I.
Right.
They said, we do want her to do the part. And I said, and her mom and I, she's an A student, great athlete. I don't know if I want this. It was at great struggle to get a stage mom to my wife. It's not built for that. I'm on set with her. All that said, she treated everybody on that, because I told her, you're nothing on the set except what they build. You're the last thing. You're nothing. I don't mean it like that. It's just that you've got to know that set deck, wardrobe, makeup, that's the workers, and the writers, that's the work. All you got to do is make their stuff better. Anytime you can add value to their stuff. And she was kind, wonderful. And we did 2 emotional scenes that I had a photographer friend of mine got teared up. He goes, Tim, you drilled that in the first episode when she's worried about leaving the North Pole. And man, looking at your own daughter's eyes and she's real sad, it makes acting very easy. All of that said, Matt, I could pass tomorrow, and it's one of those watershed moments in my life that it's wonderful. You can't. When it was good. We just did ADR yesterday, and watched her do ADR. That stuff's tough.
And for the listeners, ADR is when you are watching yourself on screen and mouthing the lines because they didn't get it clear. So that's very tough to do, because you're watching your performance, matching your performance, and saying the line, right?
She's I don't say this lightly. She's a natural at it, and I told her your mom and I we're not 100% doing like getting out of school. I want you to finish college, and I want you to finish she's a brilliant math student and a brilliant history student, and she's a real athlete. And I said, that's an important formation in life. Been through these children on both sets of Last Man Standing and Home Improvement. I'm not sure that growing up on a movie set is the most cogent thing for a kid.
Right, I understand that. But you taught her an important lesson. And this is what I sincerely appreciate about you. You realize it's a team. You're the star, but you always treated the prop guy, the cameraman, the sound, everyone with respect, because they were only there to make you look good and to capture the scene. And you sincerely appreciated that. And I've often said, making a TV show is like working construction. You all have to work together. You got a blueprint. That's, the script or the blueprint for your house. And the team and the equipment all has to work. And one person can slow the whole process down. But you were always directly or indirectly the cheerleader down there.
It reminds me of driving a race car for the years I did for Ford. You're really, from guys that bring the tires, the guys that fill the car with fuel, the guys that put the headlight moldings, the race moldings back on. There's so much, and at the very end of the day, they just present all of their work to you. And I said, on camera, that's what you guys did all that work for. And there's a great responsibility and also a great screw up, because I said, well, as my joke was always with, especially your partners, Carmen was better than you and David. I said, well, I got the general idea of the script. You'd write it down and see people going, it's kind of a ballpark. And that's the comedian part of me, and the fact it's like letting a kid get away with stuff. Other than doing a movie with David Mamet, which did not work very well that way. I mean, David and I got along. It's just they would constantly be showing me the page. Dave, it's we, not we're. And I go, what's the difference? She goes, David thinks there's a lot, so read it as written, please. Oh, okay.
Okay, I'm going to ask you the most important question of this whole podcast. Who has the coolest collection of cars, you or Jay Leno?
Oh, God, there's no question, Jay Leno.
Okay.
No question that it's so startling. Not only that, it's like, and luckily he's my older brother, every single thing that I want or dreamt about, he's got. I go, hey, Jay, I got myself a Corvair Corsa. Yeah, I got one. I have the number one that came from. Like, it's always better than the one I have. I said, I've seen your collection. You don't have a Corvair. Oh, yeah, I got one in the back. To walk through his collection is startling. I did everything about my shop. I've got a big shop, and I put artwork up. He's got artwork on the walls, decorated. I don't know where. I think it was all from NBC. Set Deck did it. I think so. I don't remember. I don't know. It's just an amazing collection. I will give a shout out to a great collector, Bruce Myers. Has the cream of the crop. Jay is a pack rat, so to speak. He has a lot of stuff in there of questionable value to me. I'm sure it has value to him. Bruce Myers' collection is all the original. He's in it. As you get older and you start taking stuff away that doesn't mean anything. All of it eventually, unless you're Egyptian, you don't take this stuff with you. Right. Although I told that to my staff, I said, if I die, I'm going to have all of you killed with me, and we're going to be in a little bronze pyramid out in North Hollywood, and all my stuff's going to be ground up and buried with me. And that Peg Duroff used to be my assistant on Home Improvement and was my secretary forever. And she looked at me one day, she goes, you mean that, don't you? And I go, Peg, I do. If I die, all of you are going to be killed with me and buried in sarcophaguses pointing at mine.
The book is called, that I'm working on, it's called Glimpses, Comedy Writer's Take on Life, Love, and all that spiritual stuff. And the glimpses refers to little glimpses of God. And by God, I'm not talking about the white-haired guy. I'm talking about moments of kindness, tenderness, compassion. You mentioned this with both of your daughters. It sounds like you have glimpses in your daily life where you see little moments of, call it spiritual insight or divine nudges.
I fight it all the time, Matt. I was very mad at God many times in my life, mad as a child at him taking my father, going, well, now I get it. We got no control over this. You'll do whatever you want. And you're kind of a mean thing that you take. I used to joke that, I spent some time in prison. I used to tell, it's always a Catholic girls' school bus that goes over a cliff. It's never a bus of criminals on their way to the holding cells. I never was comfortable with hardening the Pharaoh's heart when he wanted to let his half-brother Moses take the Hebrews out of Egypt. The Pharaoh said yes, and then God went in there and hardened his heart, and it said, what do you got against Egyptians? Because it just, and all the way through this, I get these glimmers every now and then. I think it's in Solomon somewhere. Asking you, wisdom is there. You ask, you got to be careful what you ask for. And I haven't got to Job yet. I'm not rereading. I've never read the Old Testament, and I'm a third of the way through it. And I read it, and I bring this up because I pray, because it got to me how this Old Testament, it's the Jerusalem Bible, and it came from a Catholic seminary friend of mine who gave it to me. He said, and this soft voice goes, when you start getting bored and drifting off, put it down. I want you to read this page by page by page. And then every time I get into a question, it's almost a Job-like, and I haven't got to Job yet. I asked one day in prison, why you're so mean? And why the suffering? One comic friend of mine says, somebody asked God, why you all the suffering? And God says, I don't know, it just cheers me up. And I asked one day, and I haven't got to Job yet, and I'm looking forward to reading it, is in the slam, I got this wind behind me. It says, listen, you keep asking me about these big questions, and I'm going to answer you, but I guarantee you're not going to you'll probably explode if I told you what's going on. And it's similar to what I read about in Job. You weren't here when I made this. You don't understand wind. You don't understand paper clips, why ants have the legs they do. You don't understand anything. And yet you ask me the biggest questions. Part of it's irritating, and part of it, I got to respect you people. The deal is, you got to live with it the way it is. I didn't build this. I built you and gave you the choice. This is your creation. Because I wouldn't put telephone poles made of wood down a road. I wouldn't have crap running through the streets. I appreciate that you do it, but this isn't how I would have done it. So this is your world. You created this. This is your creation. My vision lately is you stay helping another person. I asked a rabbi once, and a priest, and an evangelical, all of them the same question: who wrote the Bible? Asked anybody, who wrote the words in the beginning? What writer wrote that? And my bit is that around a campfire, this is a Hebrew version that they think is tribal, and they wrote it all as group. Still somebody wrote those exact words, because even all different Bibles, Genesis starts that way. And I keep thinking there's all in the prayer. Hey, Gadgib, how'd you start it? He goes, fire opened up in the Lord, now it's too dramatic. What was the other one? His breath blew life in, now it's too much. What that fisherman, that little kid down by the river, what did you say? Just simple, in the beginning. Okay, that. And I said, I asked a rabbi, if you were to walk away from your synagogue, what would you, if you could bring everything down to one thing? He says, it's a camp thing that I remember. Leave it better than you found it. Every situation that you're in, kindness, generosity, leave it better than you found it. Grateful, and that's Hinman told me that. And it's so difficult. I am so lack of focus. I can go to service, yeah, you're really good about it. And then 10 minutes in after that, you're honking on a horn. And I got to transition to this because I'm a group of I don't even want to say, there's no labels. A bunch of guys that go to these, they have a Bible study, and I don't do that. And these guys, it's constantly, every war would be done if you actually did what you hear Jesus was talking about, is love your neighbor. It sounds simple. That means when someone cuts you off and you go to get PO'd, you go, that's another human, I love that human. And then go down your way. If Palestinians and Israelis sat at a table and one side just went, you know what, we love you, and just walk out, you can't fight that. And I said,
the power of love. And the simplicity of do unto others, you have them do unto you. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love God, love your neighbor. It's that
Yeah.
simple.
It's so
It takes
simple,
care of everything.
except
But
people forget. I forget it. I'll forget it 2 seconds out of here. My youngest has got her first job at this little food stand. So my wife and I are going to go, and believe me, I'm going to walk by my motorcycle, which is clogged up with something in the carburetor, and it's all I'm thinking about. 2 seconds after I leave you, I'm going to go, I got to get that motorcycle. That's really important. And I mentioned this to my family. I said, any chance I get, anytime there's a conflict, and believe me, my mother's very ill, and there's 9 of us, and the way we're all dealing with it has gotten really, really ugly. And I told my sister the other night, I says, if I just end the conversation with "I love you," we're done. I understand that we disagree, but don't have to fight me. And I said, current politics has done that, where you attack the messenger if you don't like the message.
yes.
I mean, I just disagree. I mean, my politics started so long ago, and I know the Clintons. They were the kindest people to me. I used to send them home improvement stuff. And every Christmas I send them, and President Clinton sent me letters. I just didn't think that, I didn't want Hillary to be president. That was it. So I voted for this real estate guy in New York. I thought, oh good, I'm a builder. Maybe he'll help the infrastructure. That's all I cared about. It didn't turn out to be what I thought, so you move on, you get another guy, but that doesn't mean I don't like gay people, I hate women, and the fact that it's funny for a while, but then to just get used to hating your neighbor, that's the comfort level of right now, what is just hate people that you disagree with, even though they don't really disagree with you. We all like the environment. God, I can't stop talking about this. Schwarzenegger just said, it's wordage. Climate change, he goes, nobody gives a crap about climate change, with a pause. Pollution, I understand.
Oh.
And pollution kills people. I can stop polluting, pollute less. Oh, for people like me, that's a practical word. I get it. And that will, of course, affect climate change. It's
Tim,
wording.
I want to, when you mentioned prison and some dark times in your life, did you ever feel that you had a destiny? Did you have a little voice inside you saying, you have had an incredible career and life? Did you sense that at your darkest moments or not?
No. It was, what changed in me was, I think it was Juan Montoya, the race driver, and I read about him, and then a guy came to speak to us in the penitentiary about sin. Meaning it was a Toastmaster, is a speaking group. And he said, sin is actually a Greek word that means off target. And that, I respond to stuff like that. Like that word pollution from Schwarzenegger. And off target means you weren't aiming at the center of the target. So you went left or right, up or down, then you're off target. Without sin is on target. And then I started using different words. Wishing is a recipe for suffering. Focus is a recipe for frustration, and then goal-oriented. And that's what changed everything in me. Once I said, I do not want to go to prison again. I want to pay my parents back for the damage I did to my family, on all that. And then I started focusing on what I want done. Like, I made lists. I started reading books about successful men and women of all tribes. They all had serious things in common. They focused one step at a time. One step at a time. You don't sit there and wish that you were successful. I wanted to be on the Johnny Carson bench. I wanted him to go like this to me and come over. It was focus on that. Then when we did our show, the focus was on becoming a better listener. So that increased my ability, although I remember that, Ernest Borgnine and Alan, remember they were on there and he looked at me, he goes, and this is before I realized that I was capable of memorizing 30 pages, because that's what you guys asked me to do. And Ernest, he goes, I couldn't do 5. I don't know what and you guys would change it every day. And I said, that was just a side note. I said, I focused on, and then I was struggling with alcohol and drugs at that time. I said, what changed to me was focus and not wishing. I don't want to
Yes.
wish to be anything. I want to focus on being better. Focus means you're going to stumble. You're going to fall, and that's not what I wanted. I'm going to get that, and then you get it in your hand, and you go, this is really not what I wanted. You go, and my joke was always, God says, that's what you said you wanted. I go, yeah, but I didn't want this color. Well, God said you didn't mention the color you wanted. You got to be very specific about prayer and focus, and be careful because you might not get what you like, and you got to be okay with, oh, I screwed up. I didn't want the red one.
But I want to end this by throwing your words back at you. I love you. You are a great human being, and I've said that to many people. I've worked with so many people over the last 45 years, and when people ask me, what was the highlight? And I said, working with Tim Allen, and that's the God's
Man.
truth.
And I
That
love
was
you and your
true.
partners and your family, Matt. I'm telling you, you guys accepted, respected, and then encouraged me to become what I am. I said that none of this would happen without the brilliance of especially the three of you when you put it together. But I sure appreciate what you just said.
Well, God bless you. Thank you. And that's it for this podcast. Thank you for joining us on Glimpses. As you go about your day, I encourage you all to stop, look around, and try and catch a glimpse.